Japanese would call it our motivation. So we might just say what's our purpose. So maybe we're going to listen to these words, and I'm listening too. You know, I'm chatting away. These views coming from Buddhism about the world, about oneself, about people, about the mind, particularly the mind. Buddha's expertise is the mind, how we think and feel. And so we're going to listen to think about this information and really just see if there's some tools. It's really advice. So if there's even 1% of what you hear is useful, great. Put it into practice. So what's this advice for? Well, really, the broader picture, the big picture in Buddhism is that we've got this, due to this person called Buddha, his own experience, we've got this extraordinary potential to, you know, to lessen the neuroses and the fears and the separateness from others and depression, anxiety and worries, and to grow confidence and kindness and compassion and empathy and so on and so forth. Very simply, Buddhist approach. Buddhist view about the mind. Yeah, so that's what we're talking about. So why do we want to do that? Well, we want to be happy, we don't want to suffer. It's pretty basic. And then as you practice yourself, you start to open your eyes and realize we're all in the same boat. Everybody doesn't want to be suffering. Everyone wants to be happy. So we then try to help others as well. Something like that, okay? And I'll just express that in a little prayer in Tibetan. Sangye charam soke chognam la jamchu banu dagni kyab suchi dagi chunyen gipe sunam ki jola penche sangye drupa shok Sangye charam soke chognam la jamchu banu dagni kyab suchi dagi chunyen gipe sunam ki jola penche sangye drupa shok Sangye charam soke chognam la jangcho padu jagni kyab suchi dagi chunyen gibe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok. Okay. Okay. The workshop is in the mind. I mean, such a nice saying from Lama Zopa. But what does it mean, you know? Well, of course, it's like, you know, when we think of a workshop, it's something out there and we get involved in it, and that's good. You want to be a workshop with carpentry and a workshop on music, great. But here we're talking about working on the mind, you know. So, again, like I always talk, it's important if we say that, we better be clear what we mean by that. Because in one sense, we all know what the mind means. It means what you think and feel. But the analysis of it from the Buddhist perspective is kind of radically different, you know. If we study it in depth, we're going to see. So the Buddhist view in general, as I said before, essentially, actually, I like to say this, is expressed by this word Buddha, the Sanskrit word. The etymology of this word is extremely tasty and it really indicates Buddhist methodology, you know. Bud implies the total eradication, the etymology of this word. Bud implies the eradication, eventually, this is the long-term result of hard work, Buddhist methodology, the eradication from the mind, from one's own thoughts and feelings and emotions, all neuroses, all fears, all sense of separateness and misery and depression and anxiety and craziness to whatever degree. The Buddha would say that this stuff is not at the core of our being, this is his own experience. It's there, it's real, it causes pain, it causes to make our lives crazy, look at the world. But the Buddha's observation, and this is quite a radical point really, because I mean, you go to a neuroscientist and say, can you please give me a message to get rid of all neuroses and all fears and all anger and depression? I think you're mentally ill, you know, I say that, but it's not joking. Because we don't have that view, in, I think, in modern neuroscience and psychology. And this is the Buddhist view. It's strongly interesting. Buddha implies that. And then Da implies the development to perfection of everything else in the mind. Love, wisdom, compassion, fulfillment, kindness, generosity. So when we hear these two categories, we immediately identify them. We know the miserable ones. Whether we think they come from the outside, the inside, or who knows where, we don't care. We know they're miserable. Whether you have them yourself or on the receiving end of them, we know that. And we know when you hear love, kindness, compassion, whether in you or on the receiving end of them, they're nice. We know that. So this is really the stuff of the Buddhist approach. It sounds almost deceptively simple, you know, but that's the approach. This is where so-called meditation comes in. These brilliant techniques, especially this one that the world vaguely knows about as meditation, this single, what's called concentration, really, or the world knows it as mindfulness meditation. There's many varieties of it. It all comes, it tracks itself back. actually to well before the Buddha, to these genius Indians. I always quote His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who says it was these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago. Excuse me. They were the ones who began the investigations for the nature of self, which surprises us in the West because we think we did, you know, as Mr. Freud 100 years ago. And it's only really now, in this last 50 years, I would suggest. And I would suggest too, it's as a result of the Dalai Lama being in the West the last 50 years, 60 actually, and his meetings with all the different scientists and thinkers and religious leaders, bringing these views of Buddhism, which track themselves back to these Indians before the Buddha, bringing this information to, you know, more to be noticeable by our modern thinkers and scientists and so on, you know. So it's just marvelous. So I said before, and it's really true, the Buddha's expertise is the mind. We might think that, and we think it's spiritual. When we think spiritual, we don't think mind. We think soul or spirit. But it's interesting, Buddha doesn't use terms like that. He just uses the word mind. So it's important if we understand this, it's important to, well, it's important then to, if we hear what he's saying we can do, we better know what he means by the mind. So the word mind, for us, we tend to point up here to the brain, you know. Then we might think feelings and emotions and intuition and instinct are here. But from the Buddhist perspective, this word mind refers to all of it, you know. The grossest level, the grosser level, the sensory consciousness, our thoughts and concepts, this highly sophisticated level of thoughts and concepts that we know we are very good at in the modern world. You know, really complicated theories of music and math and so on. That's intellect, that's your mind. But here too, the Buddha uses the mind to refer to all of this. This is a really crucial point to hear. Thoughts, feelings, and emotions. We'd point here for that and here for mind, but for the Buddha, it's all of it. Just different levels of mind, different levels of the way that our mind functions, you know. And so, of course, the Buddha's perspective Buddha wouldn't argue if he's talking, you know, these modern thinkers like Dalai Lama talking to the modern thinkers about the brain. Buddha's expertise is not the brain, whereas we would equate that with the mind, wouldn't we? These seem to be just to be intellectual, but they're crucial points to understand. If we're trying to understand Buddha's approach, we need to understand what he means by the mind, you know, because otherwise we'll conflate it with our views and then we get confused, you know. That's why the first, when as soon as people hear about Buddhism, that he talks about reincarnation and, well, how can you know, that's not possible. If your mind is the brain, what reincarnates? We get very confused. Well, this is where the Buddha's view of the mind is radically different, you know, the way the mind functions. The etymology of the mind. It's very fascinating, actually. So from the Buddhist perspective, mind is not physical. So straight over here that you think, that'd be ridiculous. How can you prove that? Because how can you see something not physical with a microscope? Well, you can't. And that's the thing, that's the point. So if you can argue, he's at least sharing, I mean, if you say, you know, I was an old Catholic, so God talks about a soul, not physical, coming from God, which is not physical, not a function of the brain, and the special component we have. So that's how we tend to think of spiritual. Buddha doesn't talk like that. He doesn't talk about a creator. You know, it doesn't talk about a separate piece called a soul or a spirit. It doesn't talk like that. We have mind, consciousness. These words are synonymous. So the mind, from his perspective, from his own direct experience, we have to take that as a given here. It's not revelation. He didn't make it up. It's not coming from outer space. Didn't have a vision of it. Didn't have a dream of it. He's not speculating. That's a really crucial point to get. It's coming from his own direct experience. He's not asking you to believe a single word he's saying. He said, this is what I've found to be true. Here's my observation. This is the result. This is the methodology. It's over to you if you want to try it out. You know, that's the Buddhist approach very much. So what he's saying, as I said, is that we've got this marvelous potential to lessen and eventually, of course, eradicate all the neuroses and the separate sense of self and this blah, blah, blah. That's the meaning of this word nirvana. It's not some place like heaven. It means cessation of suffering and its causes. And the consequence of that is freedom from neuroses and misery and unhappiness and fully developed in goodness. This is the word Buddha, you know. So this is the way Buddhism talks. So then our job then is another way, another one of our teachers, Lama Zopa, says, we have to learn to be our own therapist. So if what goes on in our mind, okay, the other point that Buddha's making, the crucial point, and this is a really shocking point, we do not accept this one. It's a shocking point for us. is that what goes on in our mind is the main source of our happiness and suffering. This is the central point in Buddhism. What goes on in our mind is the main source of our happiness and suffering. That's pretty intense. So if that's true, and if we can learn using his methodology to lessen neuroses and eventually get rid of them and grow goodness, Buddha, then we better learn the method, isn't it? How to look inside, to the mind. So this is where it's confusing. I mean, we know, this is what since Mr. Freud, I suppose, we're really valuing now and developing more and more these different methods of psychotherapy, of looking into, not getting a microscope and mute your brain. That's the neuroscience do that, that's fine. But the psychological approach, the therapeutic approach, the psychoanalytical approach, dozens and dozens of methods now. Marvelous, This is the Buddhist approach. Learning to listen to what the hell is going on here and able to unpack and unravel it, and then to reconfigure it and change it. That's the Buddhist approach. So then, like I said before, we'd make this radical difference, wouldn't we, between thoughts and feelings. Thoughts and feelings. There are like two separate parts of this. But from the Buddhist perspective, they are utterly linked. And if we even theoretically understand this, if we even understand this theoretically, it's a revelation, I tell you. And it's not our, so the Buddhist approach is, when you study the Buddhist view of the mind, and you can see the literature on it is pretty extensive over the centuries. We've got two ways the mind functions: sensory and mental. Sensory and mental. Sensory and mental. And we kind of merge them, don't we? But it's very evident if we do acknowledge these two. Okay, a way I always like to use as an example of how this exactly is, it's clear to us when we see it this way. My example every time, I will say, what a lovely cup, So you see me put my eyes over here, and I'll then go in the next millisecond, what a lovely cup. So technically that's ridiculous in Buddhism, because sensory consciousness is the part, and they study it in depth, is the capacity of our mind, because mind is sensory and mind is mental, two distinct parts. The sensory is the grosser level, the immediate one, because let's face it, from the second we wake up, we launch into we've got the mental, how we feel, but the most vivid is the sensory, isn't it? What you see, what you feel through your body, what you taste, smell, and touch and hear. So the outside world is those objects of the five senses, isn't it? Immediate. Shape. So here, this is the point. It's just huge. It's already huge if we get this one. So we'll go, what a pretty cup. But that's not possible for the Buddha. The sensory consciousness says the individual eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, tactile. They're very limited in their capacity for cognition. The job of mind is to cognize, to know, to be aware. They're synonymous. That's the job of the mind. So eye consciousness can only cognize two things: shape and color. Ear consciousness can only cognize sound. They're profoundly limited in their capacity for cognition. So therefore, if eye consciousness can only cognize shape and color, you have to ask the question, this is the point now, which part of my mind is cognizing a pretty cup? Well, that's your mental content. As Lama Zopa says, that's where the workshop is. So I put it this way, and it's not wrong, where they describe it in the texts, not using these words because they didn't have computers then, but didn't have Google, but quicker than Google, the millisecond my eyes go there, quicker than Google, up comes the concept, the thought, the opinion, the idea, the concept. What a pretty cup. Now that can't be cognized by eyes. When I listen, I always use the example of Miles Davis. I'm a jazz fan. I hear that sound. I can hear one note coming out of Miles Davis's trumpet. The first note, I'll go, wow, Miles Davis. My ears are not capable of that. That's my mental consciousness. So in there is where the workshop is, and that's what we have to learn to understand. This is actually huge if we can get this. So in other words, we live this from the second we wake up in the morning, we receive information with our senses, but the next millisecond, mental conscious, our thoughts and feelings and emotions, this mind of mine that has stored all these memories, all these opinions, all these ideas, all these blah, 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 lovely, beautiful, this, that, good, bad, and out comes a story. Look at that ugly person. Your eyes change shape and color, I'm sorry. So look at that ugly person coming from a conceptual story in the mind. This is actually a revelation. We can get this. So mental consciousness is where the thoughts are. And so now mental consciousness, in the long term from the Buddhist perspective, it's got these much subtle levels of cognition that we don't even posit as existing in modern psychology or neuroscience. They are not a function of the brain. This is where it gets mystical for us. These subtle levels of mind, subtler beyond conceptual, actually, and these Indians discovered it more than 3,000 years ago in their investigation of the nature of self. And they're the ones who created this brilliant technique that's known as the cultivation of concentration, samadhi. It's a real, don't just call it hippie trippy religious, it's brilliant psychology. So when we've accessed these more subtle levels of our mind, which we have to do in long term, and from the Buddhist perspective, in order to get this achievement of rid of all the rubbish, full of all the goodness long term, we need to access these more subtle, much more refined, much more brilliant, much more capable, refined levels of our mental consciousness. But we don't even posit those existing in our modern psychological or neuroscientific methods. There's all these discussions about it now, which is marvelous. So we live at the grosser level. So we live at the sensory, and then we live at the grosser level of the mental consciousness, which is conceptuality. So that's what's surprising. When you say anger, you'd never think conceptual. When you say jealousy, when you say the emotions, you'd never think, oh, conceptual, I mean, ridiculous. But that's the Buddha's point. But the tragedy is, we don't notice what's happening in the mind, all these thousands of thoughts, because we do know theoretically, but we know experientially from the second we wake up in the morning, the thoughts are stopping, the thoughts are going, 1,000 thoughts a second. We know that. There's chatting away. We pay no attention, and this is the problem. We pay no attention until they are shouting, until they come to the level of our senses and shape the body. Oh, what do I do? I'm getting angry. I want to kill my husband. It's a bit late. The angry thoughts, the Buddha is saying, that anger, that grosser level of that shaking of the mind linked to the physical body, the body and mind are very connected, shaking, and the voice is screaming, that's the grossest level. We only notice the anger when it gets to that level. Or we only notice that you're depressed, which is internalized aversion, because you're inert in bed and can't get out. In other words, we don't pay attention to what is going on in here until the body is affected. That's what we call feelings, you know. That's why when we hear that anger is based upon a conceptual story that then with habit impacts upon the physical, and then we notice it when it's at the grossest level, and we think that anger's conceptual, it's like a joke. But this is the thing, you know. That's why we have to learn these techniques of concentration, so we can start to dig deep down beneath the physical, beneath the emotional. And this takes concentration. It's a practical approach, it's something mystical, you know? And it's at that level that we can be our own therapist. Because then we start to hear how anger is just the physical and emotional expression of a series of conceptual thoughts in the mind. We can prove this, you know, slowly. We have to listen to what the hell is going on inside here. But the tragedy is also, because we've allowed these habits to develop, because everything becomes a habit. These conceptual stories are a habit. We've learned them since we're little children. Buddha says, and this is where the point about reincarnation comes in, at least it's a theory, it's very impactful. You become programmed, not with mummies and daddies' minds, not coming from a creator, but from your own. You bring your own stuff with you. That's the massive difference in the Buddhist approach, from the Christian, from the Hindu, from the Muslim, from the Jewish, and from the psychological modern. And who knows what, from probably the Australian Aboriginal's view, and the Indian American's view, and God knows who else's view on the planet. We come with our own stuff. So even if we can't prove it yet, and we can eventually, Buddha says, because it's coming from his experience, so we take it as a hypothesis, but it's very empowering because it enables you to start to take responsibility rather than blaming your mum, you know. We love to blame our mums, not even our dads, we love to blame mum. Somehow mum gets it. I never know why. They both did the thing, they're both in bed, it's their egg and their sperm equal. But somehow mother gets the blame, isn't it? So fascinating. So we have to learn to hear our own mind, the thoughts, the conceptual stories, they inform our emotions. That's the job of being a Buddhist. And then I was hearing them. Once you start to hear them, and this is the other point, that's because of the habit of these anger, jealousy, depression, whatever they might be that you identify with, and because they're so habitual, and you don't remember learning them. My mother didn't have to teach me to be angry. I had it down. So because it's so habitual, this is the tragedy. We believe it. And when you realize it's a conceptual story, so what does anger say? What does self-hate say? I am a creep, I am nothing, I am nobody, nobody loves me, I am terrible, I am evil, everything he says about, we know this is a gross way of putting it. We know these thoughts, and we can write them down, personify them, you know. This is what we start to realize they're conceptual. It's really clear anger is conceptual. You know, if you're a person who shouts it out, you just have to tape record that person, or, you know, get your phone, record them, and then transcribe it. Well, now you get your AI to do it in 1 second. You have a nice piece of paper, or on your phone, you have a neat description. You have a neat series of words. You know, that person who's shouting and yelling with these irrational sentences, it'll be nicely transcribed by your AI thing on your phone, and there it is. And what does it say? How dare this, he this, she this, I this is evil, I hate this person, whatever the words are, right there. You go, oh, that's anger. How fascinating. You're not stupid, you can see it's anger. Now, what if you don't shout? Some people don't shout, but you keep it inside. Well, if you were kind enough to write it down for me, and you'd have these 2 bits of paper, you're going to have the same story on both bits of paper, except one person shouts, one doesn't. So we think the anger is the emotion. No, that's just the expression, the physical body shouting, the physical body getting excited. The anger is the mind, the thoughts, the stories, the conceptual stories in there that inform the body. So that's what we have to start to listen to. So in our culture, we either think you vomit it all out, which is the angry person, or you live in denial, which is the depressed person. But this third option is to pay attention. And then slowly, because it's shock horror when we start to hear these thoughts, pay attention to them. Then the thing is, this is the Buddhist approach, to start to identify, to distinguish between, because it's not just negative stories in there, there's also positive. You're kind, you're patient, you're loving, you don't lie, you don't steal. They're all there too. These tendencies are there, but we don't pay attention to them. The negative ones loom large, and we think that's me. Isn't it? This is the tragedy. So we've got to sit back and listen and observe all these different conceptual stories in there. Some are valid and positive and virtuous and useful. Some are hopeless and exaggerated and distorted and cause you misery and cause you to harm others. Buddhism calls them very simply virtuous and non-virtuous, negative and positive. We don't like to talk that way in psychology. It sounds like judgment, but it's a really clear way of defining them. And begin to distinguish between them, sort them out, listen to them, hear them, and then be your own therapist. Start to use your positive stories. Like I think they're all my roommates. You know, thousands of roommates in there. The negative ones, I'm this, I'm that, I'm hopeless, I'm ugly, she's horrible, no one loves me, it's not fair, poor me, all these stories, you know, we have to identify them, they're just there, so automatically. You have to hear them, articulate them. And then you have your other thoughts, you have to bring them out to argue with them. It's like so simple, it's a joke, but it's profound. But the tragedy is because the negative ones are strong, habitual. Not only, as Lama Zopa says, it's bad enough that we think I'm a creep or she's horrible or he's evil. Bad enough. But the killer is we believe they are a valid assessment of reality. And the key point Buddha is making, that these neurotic states of mind not only are disturbing, but they're also delusional. They're exaggerated, distorted. And that's the part that's hard to see. So to unpack and unravel all this stuff and to learn to reconfigure these conceptual stories and to lessen the neuroses and grow the goodness. That essentially, from here to Buddhahood, that's the job. It's just the toughest job we'll ever do. Because it demands a lot of clarity, a lot of concentration. It demands a lot of self-confidence to know it's possible, you know, and then to understand that this is the key method to learn to give up suffering and get happy. No matter what the outside world is doing, that's the point. That's pretty intense. I mean, there's a saying in Buddhism, if you can change something out there, please change it, no problem. It's not a moralistic issue. If you can stop your husband beating you up, kindly stop him. But what if you can't, honey? That's why my friends in prison are such good examples. They don't have the luxury of getting a key and walking out the door, so they know, the ones I know, the practitioners, they can change their mind. And we all know this. We know one day you wake up and you can't stand your sister. She makes you crazy. Next day you think you're okay with her. We know that. Same sister, same rubbish. One day you're okay, one day you're crazy. We know this. So it's telling us immediately. It's proving Buddha's point. If you change your mind, everything changes for you. It'll still be the same thing maybe, but you'll interpret it differently. It doesn't mean you shouldn't, it's not a moralistic thing. You shouldn't sit there and allow someone to beat you up because I can change my mind instead. No, don't be stupid. Stop them beating you up if you can. Of course, just be sensible. Anyway, you surely know by now that I'm a fraud because I keep saying the same thing. Have you not heard this 4,000 times? And I have to keep saying it. I mean, every time I say it, I get something from it too. So are we communicating anyway? Are we communicating? Are we communicating? Anything I'm saying is true, do you think? Do you think so? Even 1% of it? What do you think?
I do think that things do happen and we assign meaning to them. We assign meaning.
Yes, yes, exactly.
And that sort of interprets our reaction to the way that we receive them. We can perceive something as something bad or something good.
There you go.
It all is in the mind.
This is the point. So the thing is, sometimes when we hear this, we think, oh, well, then I should let the world be horrible and let all the bad things happen and let the wars happen and not have an opinion because it's all in the mind. No, that's ridiculous. That's chucking the baby out the bathwater. That's why I like to use the example of the one person I always use, the example of a friend in prison. I've been working with people in prison these days less, but before I did. This one woman, I always use the same example. This one woman, Sunny, she didn't have Buddhism. She wasn't religious. There she was, falsely accused of murdering 2 policemen in isolation, like, on death row, 17 years altogether. Totally innocent. Husband executed. His brains burst into flames. Lost her children. Lost her family. In a cell on her own with a Bible. I think she was Jewish or something. She had no method. She had no particular religion. For me, she's the most outrageous example of the efficacy of this approach. And you could say Buddha doesn't own this approach. He doesn't have copyright on it. It's just that he's an expert at it. I would suggest it that way. Because we all know this to one degree or another, So this woman, I never failed to be amazed by her. She's out of prison now. She said, finally I realized I couldn't change anything. That's why it's such a stark example when you're thinking like a prison. You can't walk out. Literally, she was in prison. Literally couldn't move her body from that cell. And she said, finally I realized I couldn't change anything, but they couldn't take my mind from me. So this is why there's such examples like that, And then she learned from using her own method. She learned yoga. She learned herself on her own, in a little cell on her own, like medieval, Learned how to do yoga and things and learned to work on her conceptual thoughts, just like exactly like you said. I mean, for me, it's such an incredible example because it's so extreme, And this is the interesting point. She worked on her mind, but she just didn't give up working on her freedom. She never stopped working on the outside world. So I remember the same time, I always use this example. At the same time, I remember reading about another fellow who was wrongly accused, who would be what we call normal. So she was so unusual. And he went out of his brain, completely insane, screaming daily. I did not rape and kill that woman. I did not rape and kill. He went out of his mind. Now, that's what we would consider normal. I mean, we just stub our toe. Well, of course I'm angry. I stubbed my toe, we say. We don't think we have an option, And that's the point here. And it's not moralistic. It's just totally practical. If I can stop the person harming me, if I can make the war in Ukraine go away, if I can stop the terrible suffering on the planet, please do it. But what if I can't at that moment? And this is the point. My friend Sunny because she worked on her mind, because she didn't lose the plot, and that's intensely difficult, she never gave up. Therefore, she didn't lose her common sense. She didn't lose her sanity. Therefore, she never stopped working on her freedom, and she got her freedom eventually. Whereas the other guy, this poor tragic other man who's so normal, because he lost his mind, he could not do anything about getting his freedom. He couldn't even put himself together. So by working on your mind, one, you get the benefit of it, you stay sane and clear, and two, you can be of use to the world and be of benefit to others and yourself. In other words, go be a political activist, you know. Make the world a better place, no question. But if you can't control your anger and your jealousy and your depression, your low self-esteem, you'll just kill yourself first. But if you work on your mind, become more steady and brave and courageous and clear-eyed, you can then be more contained, and then you can be more useful. Like, you know, develop two wings of the bird. A bird needs two wings. We're discussing the first one. They call this the wisdom wing. Work on yourself. Sort yourself out. Then you can be an incredible tool to be a benefit to others, you know. So this is like, when you can see among like Tibetans, they are Buddhists since like 7th century, 90% of the country, 95%, 99%. Well, until the Chinese communists came along, 99% of Tibetans were Buddhist. There were a couple of Muslims, I think. So they then lost their country, you know, 1950, 1949, and then 59 they had to escape. But so basically, they're practicing what I'm telling you about. This is coming from them. My teachers are Tibetan. But they just didn't sit there like, oh, well, it's all due to us and it's all just change our mind, let the Chinese run over us. No, they're the best political activists you can find. But they don't lose the plot. You know, they're able to, yeah. So it's for one's own benefit. We are the beneficiaries. Because the world is a suffering place. Terrible things happen on this planet, and terrible things happen to us, and sometimes out of the blue. You don't expect it. We all know that. Suffering is unbearable. The suffering that comes to us is unbearable. This is a method to sort yourself out and then to learn to find a way to interpret the outside world in a way that retains your sanity and enables you to do something about it, like sunning as an example. So in other words, one of the things we have to learn to, like the stubbing the toe is a simple example. I mean, you can't compare stubbing the toe with being on death row, you know, wrongly accused, but the principle is the same. So we even just stubbing the toe, what do you mean? Of course I'm angry, you will say. In other words, we don't think we have a choice but to be angry when bad things happen. And that's all Buddha is saying is we do. Because one is mental and one is sensory. Stubbing the toe is a physical thing. Anger is a mental thing, and it's an interpretation of stubbing the toe. And that's a simple example. So start with the small ones. Don't wait till you've been wrongly accused of murder, okay? Don't wait till then. Start with the small things when you practiced. Any questions, anybody? Paola, how are you, Paola? Paola's in Italy. Hello, sweetheart. Any questions, Paola?
Actually, yes.
Can't hear you, darling. Mute.
Can you hear me now?
Talk to me, Paola.
Can you hear me now?
I can, darling. Talk to me.
Okay.
How is everything?
Actually, I'm in Switzerland now, helping a friend out.
Not yours. So wait on, darling. Just talk a bit louder, sweetie.
Okay.
Talk a bit louder, Paola.
Let's try that. Can you hear me now?
I can. Talk a bit louder. Go.
Okay.
Good.
Okay. Okay.
Go.
I listened to your teachings in the last months, and reading the material you sent me, the Lamrim, and I have started to be patient with myself first.
Good, well done. That's a good start. Well, good. Okay, so you're seeing a difference? It's working.
Yes, I'm working on my anger, and I don't need to go into details, but I would like to ask you something.
Good job.
Yeah, I started first of all not to react when I get angry, but just to shut up. and see what happens.
What happens?
And see what happens. And I enjoy
trying that. Are you trying it?
Yeah, I am trying.
And what happens? What happens?
I am enjoying it very much because I don't show my anger, and I like the fact that I'm not showing my anger.
Well done.
No, I don't know. I know it's a step by step. I have to go
Of course it
very,
is.
very.
So you have to also make sure, so you make sure that if you don't speak the words, you don't just suffocate the thoughts. You're aware of the thoughts, right?
Yes,
Good.
I have started to see something.
Good. Good, Paula.
Okay.
You're
Okay.
So that's not the question. So what's the question?
What to do next?
Oh, darling. Sweetheart, what you're just asking me. No, listen.
I'm sorry.
Listen, it's like you've just started to learn to play tennis and you've now learned how to pick up the racket and hit the ball. What to do next is keep practicing and get better and better and better at it. That's the answer. That's it. There's nothing secret. And then see the consequences for you. But you see your mind more clearly, you become more in control, you become more confident, you become more relaxed, you harm people less, and it will keep progressing. You are a work in progress. Do you understand me, Paula?
Yes.
So delight in your progress and keep moving. That's it, sweetheart. Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right, darling. You're doing well,
Thank
Paula. Go on then, Roxy. Talk to me, darling. Roxy.
All right. Can you hear me?
I can, sweetie.
Okay. Hi, good morning, Venerable. So recently I've come into situations where people are asking me for money and I feel guilty saying no.
Homeless people or your husband or your brother?
No, like friends and extended friends.
What do you mean asking you for money? $10, $10,000?
$4,500.
A loan or a gift?
He says he'll pay me back, but I really doubt that. And I really should not be doing that. I technically have enough money to do that, but I feel so awkward. And I just told him, I hope he gets out of that situation and will be okay. But I know that he's going to keep asking.
Okay, so stop for a second. I'm just curious, it's not saying you should or shouldn't, but what is the reason you think you shouldn't lend them the money? What is your reason? Out of interest, that's out of interest for this conversation.
I don't trust that he'll pay it back, and I also don't trust.
That's important. That's being very wise.
Yeah.
That's being very wise. So you feel he's a bit hopeless and he's done this before, and you feel he's not going to be able to pay it back. Then that's the reason.
Yeah.
Have you told him that, or you just said no, or you haven't told him yet?
I haven't given a direct answer yet because he asked and he said maybe he'll be able to get it another way, but he'll let me know if he can't get it. And so I haven't given.
Or is it your brother? It all the question of who the person is.
This is like a friend of my husband. My husband said, do not do it.
Oh, okay. A friend of your husband. How come the friend isn't going to your husband?
He knows that my husband won't give him the money.
So he's not really your friend.
No, not really.
Okay. I mean, you know, it's like, fine. I mean, you either, if someone asks you for money, you make a decision, okay, I'm going to give it, and if I get it back, great. But if you're going to make a decision not to, then have a good reason, and you simply tell him no. Just tell him you don't, and the thing is, you don't owe him any explanation. You don't owe any explanation. You simply say, I'm really sorry, I can't do it at the moment. Thank you very much, and close the door. Close it. You don't have to discuss it, and you do not owe him any explanation. It's none of his business. Do you understand?
Yeah. And then just don't feel guilty.
Discussing it with him, because I think that's inappropriate. You don't need to.
With the friend or with my husband?
Yeah, with the friend. With the friend.
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I just said, like, I hope it gets better.
Okay, so you haven't told him yet?
No.
Okay, so it's very clear. You haven't, and you just simply say, I'm so sorry, I cannot do it, and that's it. Full stop. Period. Close the subject. Would you agree that's what you're wanting, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So does that answer? You didn't ask the question because I jumped in, but is that what your question is, or is it just?
Yeah. Basically, it was like what to do and how to not feel
you
guilty.
don't owe him an apology. You don't owe him an explanation or an apology. If it's just, you know, if it's your husband, maybe it's a different discussion, isn't it? That's why it's a question of who the person is, you know. Do you understand?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Very clear.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, darling. So who's this one? Hi, sweetheart. Who is that? Can't
It's
read the
like
word.
a
Sure.
true drinking
Talk to me,
tea.
sweetie. Go.
So I don't think I can tell the difference
A bit
between.
loud. I'll get a bit closer to the mic or
Yeah,
something.
is this better?
Better, yeah.
I can't tell the difference between when I am suppressing my emotions versus handling them.
I understand. This is a really, really important point. Let's discuss it, shall we?
Mhm.
Yeah, let's discuss. Yeah, okay. So in the Buddhist approach, there's a very, in terms of levels of practice, the very first level of practice isn't know your mind. It's actually, that's more advanced. So especially when it's strong habits, we know that if anger is, just say anger is a strong habit, like in my case as a kid, then I didn't have to suppress anything. It just came out of my mouth in the first second. Do you understand? So then in our culture, if we think, well, I shouldn't be angry, and then I think, well, I have to suppress my anger, but there's two very different approaches, and this is what takes time. So the very first level of practice in Buddhism is don't control your mind yet, control the servants of your mind. So the servants of our mind are our speech for most of us, but of course for some of us it could also be our body. People might punch or steal or kill. So the very first level of practice is focusing on harnessing our verbal and physical energy. Don't steal, don't kill, don't jump on everybody else's partner, don't scream and shout and yell and hurt people. It's got a very powerful meaning, and it's not because you're a naughty girl and you'll get punished. It's because, guess what? This is going to harm you and harm other people. So the very first level is control your body and speech, and this is very powerful. So so what we tend to think of, that means suppress and deny. No, as you mentioned, we either think you vomit it out or you suppress. No, when we learn like simple meditation techniques that enable us to focus the mind, what we're doing is starting to hear all the crazy thoughts. We have to become conscious of what is happening in our mind. So your first decision, like Paula said, she's learned to shut her mouth, but she's not suppressing because she's noticing the anger. It's a very conscious process. You decide, I will not say those words, but when you have to make that decision. You don't say, I won't get angry. You say, I won't say angry words. And because you're conscious, you notice the anger rising, but you shut the mouth. You notice the anger, you don't suppress, and you don't vomit it out. And then because you're doing this inner work, you're hearing your anger, and then when you leave the person, you do the work on your mind. There's a saying in Tibetan, when you're with others, control your body and speech. And when you're on your own, that's when you work on your mind. So it's very conscious. You get my point here? There's a big, big difference. Suppressing is what we tend to do, which is why we all go crazy or get depressed or have a mental breakdown 14 years later, because we're not noticing what is happening in the mind. That's the key job we have to learn to do, to become conscious. You with me?
Yes. Yeah. So my issue isn't that I like say things out. My issue is when I feel them, I avoid them. And so
let's start that again. What?
So my issue is like when I feel anxiety, for example, I avoid it. So I think I just naturally
avoid seeing it in your mind, you mean?
Yes.
Well, of course, that's exactly the point. That's what we all do because we don't know what to do with it. Some people just put it all away. I mean, there's a friend of mine I know who's got very good discipline all over his life, very good discipline with his body and speech, but he has literally extreme panic attacks, but didn't even notice, until slowly starting to work on himself, and now it's coming out, which is scary as hell. So suppressing is because we can't cope with it, so we push it away, and live in denial. So it's a big job to change that. So learn, but you have to be putting yourself in a safe environment. If you're around people or events or places that arise your anxiety or arise your anger, you maybe got to be careful and don't do that. But it takes time. to really become conscious of what's happening. And this goes to very deep levels. But we just have to practice, start practicing, you know. And anxiety is just the tip of, so if anger is the tip of the iceberg, so is anxiety. Really, anger is just anxiety, but it also harms other people. Anger is just anxiety, having a panic attack, screaming and shouting. Whereas people who are anxious tend not to harm others, you understand? But it's the same thing. And of course, there's a lot of ways we have to learn to understand that anxiety from the Buddhist perspective, and maybe we can talk about that. So just practice, sweetheart, just practicing.
Okay.
Try and protect yourself from those environments. And then when you're on your own, you've got to do the looking at it. You know, don't do the looking while you're around other people. It's too difficult. Do you understand?
Yes.
Are we really going?
I think so. I think so.
Good, darling. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Yes, Joey. Hello, sweetheart.
Yes. Hello, Venerable. One of the things that I'm going through that's big in my life
is Joey.
What's that? What is it?
A bit closer to where the microphone.
Okay. Oh. Okay. Sorry. One of the. Can you hear me better now?
Yep.
Okay. One of the main things that I'm struggling with right now is exactly what we're talking about, and I'm learning from you that everything that I think, do, and say matters. So my question to you is, I have two roommates that I absolutely have grown to feel just hatred, and I loathe both of them.
You mean real roommates in your house, not in your head?
I mean the real roommates in the house, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what,
You've got two people live in your house and you can't stand them. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes.
Well, honey child, my first question is, how come you haven't one thrown them out or two left?
Yes, I know. That's so true. I'm not in a position to leave right this moment and or throw them out at this exact
So
moment.
Whose house is yours or theirs?
Actually, it's one of my dear friend's house, and these are his two grown men sons.
What year is what?
It's my dear friend's house.
And what I'm getting at is, who is in charge of this house?
Their daddy.
But so you don't have the right to throw them out?
I do not.
Okay, then you've got to throw yourself out if you can't cope. This is,
okay.
You know, the biggest problem, Joey. If we look at I always think of this, it's really tough, but I always quote this number I read from the United Nations or something, that 40% of all women who get murdered are murdered by the bloke in the same bed. Now, this is not about feminism. This is about not knowing what the hell is going on in our mind and in our lives until it's too late. This is the point. We wait until things get too late, and then you want to kill somebody. You know, you've got to, I mean, if you're in a place, if you're paralyzed in a wheelchair with no money and nowhere to go, then okay, you'll be like a prisoner. You've got to work on your mind. But if you have got the opportunity to get the hell out, if you can't handle the anger, if you can't handle the situation, don't be guilty about it. Get the hell out of the way to protect yourself, Joey. It's like if you're an alcoholic, you're telling me that you're living in a house with bottles of wine. No wonder you're having problems. So we've got to protect ourselves, Joey. It's got to come from self-respect. And that's the irony of the 40% of women who got murdered. We have no self-respect in the end. We keep going back like moths to the flame, you know. We've got to become conscious. That's the key one. Be aware of what you can handle and can't handle. And if you can't handle this, you've got to protect yourself and get the hell out. Okay. What do you think, Joey? Is it sensible what I'm saying?
Yes, it's very sensible.
Okay. Focus on
very
that.
much so.
Don't focus on that. Don't focus on dealing with your anger. That's too difficult. Focus on protecting yourself first. You get my point? I mean, nobody on the planet, Joey, would expect a person who's addicted to alcohol to give up attachment to alcohol while you continue to drink alcohol. It's like demented. So it's the same with anger or any emotion it is. Now, if you're like my friend in prison who doesn't have the luxury to change, then okay, work on your mind, babe. But you've got the possibility to change. Have you not? To change the situation. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, then be sensible, girl.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right. Hello, Cyril.
Hello, dear Venerable.
Show your face, Petal. I like seeing your face. Cyril, show me your face.
Yes.
Ugly today. You don't want to see me?
Yes.
Cyril. I know Cyril. Well, you don't have to if you don't want to. Don't worry. Just talk to me. Where are you?
My question is,
There you go.
I-
Cyril, talk to me. Come on,
yes,
baby.
you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I tend to build up stories.
No, a bit clearer, please. A bit clearer, the words. Near the mic.
I have a tendency to create stories. I tend to imagine things.
You tend to create stories.
Yeah, I imagine many
Yes, I
things.
remember. Yes, you imagine things. Yes, I know.
imagine
Are you
things, yes,
aware
but-
of this imagining? You obviously you are, because you did state it. So is this constantly or occasionally, once a week, every day, or what, Cyril?
It depends, but sometimes I see strange things, and I tend to make assumptions, and so I build stories, trying to understand.
I understand that. Is it extreme, like the things you talked about in the email you sent me?
Yeah.
So you're a bit of a conspiracy theorist, Cyril.
Yes, I don't know exactly, but
I
something
can't
strange.
speak clearer, darling. Speak clearer.
There are strange events, so I try I build some stories a little bit to
I know. So
understand.
are you? The key thing, if you are aware of doing this, I mean, sometimes it might be true, but if we get into the habit, we start to not know the difference between facts and fiction, and it's really important before you lose your mind, Cyril. You understand? I mean, is this causing you problem every day, or is it just sometimes?
Yes, sometimes.
Every day,
Yeah, every day.
from the time you wake up in the morning.
Um,
What do you do
I
with
mean,
your life, Cyril? Have you got a job or something?
yes.
What do you do?
Some research.
What, darling?
Some research.
Who? Research. Research what? Research. Researching what, Cyril?
On road traffic.
On what?
Road traffic.
Road traffic. Who employs you?
It's the university.
So you've got a very busy, in other words, you have a very busy intellectual mind. No wonder you have conspiracy theories. You've got to protect your mind, Cyril. Do you do your practice every day?
Yes.
You try to do your practice? Do you have
Yes.
confidence in the methods and things?
Yes, of course.
Well, you've got to just sort of, how do you approach this every day with your own self? How do you talk to yourself when these things happen? What do you say to yourself?
I say unbelievable stories, so I don't know. I start to believe the stories, so I don't know.
Cyril, I think, I know, darling, I think you should email me more. We'll discuss it more on, when I email you and give you answers and you just say thank you and that's the end of it, we should discuss it more, okay? Let's discuss it more.
Okay.
Privately. It's a good idea. We should do that, I think. Would you
Okay,
like to
thank
do
you.
that?
Yes.
Maybe we should speak on the telephone one day. We can make it more easy, back and forth, instead of emails, okay? So you
Okay.
email me your phone number and we can talk, okay?
Okay, thank you, Venerable Robina.
Okay, Cyril. Bye, sweetheart.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Questions here? Anybody questions? Yes, go.
Thank you again.
He's just come back from Nepal. He's been to the Courtin monastery. for a retreat.
It was amazing. 10 days introduction to Buddhism.
Was it good, was it? You meeting all the
And
monks?
I really thought of you the whole time. Thank you again.
You what?
I thought of you the whole time.
Oh, you did?
Thank you.
Because what you saw was when you heard all these words I say in the simple
Yes.
way, you heard it in the traditional way.
Exactly. Lama Zopa Rinpoche.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
And there was
Oh, nice.
also one man there who said, "I'm here because I saw this nun once and she scared the hell out of me." And it was you.
That sounds right.
So I was like, I know who this is.
I'm sorry. Oh my God. So I'm so glad you had a good
Yeah, it
time.
was amazing.
I'm so happy. I'm so happy you went.
So thank you. again.
Good, a total pleasure. So what's your question? You got a question?
So last time I was here, you said something very quickly in passing. You said, "I always say, I've never heard anyone who says I can't stop having
Good thoughts. That's right.
And I was
Precisely.
just wondering if you could expand on that.
Okay,
was
I understand.
curious, yeah.
Okay, I understand. Well, going back to this kind of model, the Buddhist view, okay, I'll say it a bit more. In the Buddhist model of the mind, psychologically, we can divide, this is a very curious one, we don't say it in modern psychology, we can divide all the thousands of thoughts and feelings and emotions into three categories, and this is a crucial point. Three categories. The first lot are the negative, unhappy, or non-virtuous, deluded, I-based, fear-based, miserable. We all know them. Attachment, anger, pride, low self-esteem, jealousy, depression, anxiety, you name it. We know the names. And what's interesting is we don't use these simple words in modern psychology. We use all these fancy Greek terms to them, you know. So then you've got the second lot. And I say that these are our saving grace. The virtues, the goodness, the kindness, the ethics, the wish not to harm, not to lie, not to kill, to kind of be kind, generosity, forgiveness. We know these qualities and we have them. Now, the third category, just incidentally, I call them the mechanics of our mind, and they're not the issue here. Concentration, good memory, you know, practical issues, whether, and they neither, these forget that lot. It's this is the distinguishing we have to do is between all these other thousands of thoughts and feelings and emotions. So a simple example would be, let's say, you know, what's your name again? Steve. Let's say Steve is my boyfriend. I don't have boyfriend, but pretend I do. And so I will say, oh, I love Steve. Now, if you want to look at these two categories of states of mind, the negative, neurotic, deluded ones and the virtuous, positive ones, love, technically in Buddhist terms, is a virtuous state of mind. It's altruistic. It's a delight in Steve's happiness. And we all recognize that. But we all know it comes along with the other neurotic one called attachment. This emotional hunger, this low self-esteem, I'm nobody, but now Steve adores me, I must be a valid person, and you become hungry for Steve, and you manipulate Steve, and you control Steve, and you possess Steve, because you believe that having Steve is making you feel like you're a valid, and that's the messy bit. Attachment, can't bear to think then you get jealous if he doesn't look at you properly, you get angry if he doesn't come home on time. Look at the world. So attachment and love seem to us like the same state of mind, but one is the poison, manipulative, I-based, fear-based, miserable bit, and one is the clear, kind, compassionate, wise bit. And they come together like a big soup, you know? And so the job is to distinguish the neurotic, deluded, and they're I-based, they're miserable, they're unhappy, they're fear-based. And the other ones are virtuous and reasonable. So the good thoughts and the bad thoughts, speaking simply. So I joke, I've never yet met a person who says, I can't stop thinking good thoughts. You know, if you listen to your mind all the time, usually the central player is I. And it's usually, oh, I can't do this, and I can't be bothered, and I'm so tired, or I'm jealous, or she doesn't love me, or, I mean, these are the voices that seem to be louder. You know, and then you know, but you don't keep saying, oh, I'm being so patient, and I love all the sentient beings, and I love this person, I love that person, and she's so kind, look at the world, wow, these amazing people. We do have positive thoughts, it's a miracle, but they don't seem to run rampant. They don't seem to come uninvited, isn't it? So unless you're, and so all Buddhism is saying is we can develop, eventually it developed to that point. And that's what these so-called bodhisattvas are, who've rid the mind of the rubbish. And they only, that's why it sounds weird to us, like Lama Zopa, you know, when you know, our teacher who passed away last year, he was considered an example of these people who've done the job of ridding the mind of I-based thoughts, which sounds demented to us. We think that's mental illness in our culture. Bodhisattvas are beings who have given up the rubbish and only think of others and only think good thoughts. But that for us is almost like mental illness. We think that's abnormal, you know. Do you see what I'm saying? Yes. Even when we're nice, we're all nice people. We're not multi-murderers around here. We're not rapists. And, you know, look at us. We come to this class, for God's sake, about being a nice person. But we seem to always have these diminished thoughts, and they're the ones of anxiety and worries. Anxiety, what's anxiety? Anxiety, fearful that the good thing won't happen, fear of the thing that did happen, thinking about what people think of you, worried about this one, worried. They're always anxiety and worries and fears and jealous. They're the unhappy ones, you know, and they seem to loom large. I mean, even about our body, I don't think I've met anybody on the planet who doesn't have negative thoughts about their own body. You know, I'm a bit fat, I'm too thin, I'm this wrong, wrong shape, wrong this, wrong that, wrong, you know, curly hair, toes too big, my left testicle's the wrong size. I mean, you hear my point. Nobody, even the most beautiful person on the planet. I remember reading an interview with Audrey Hepburn. She was considered beautiful looking, a skinny little lady who wore a Givenchy clothing, you know. And then she thought her nose was too big and her eyes were the wrong shape. And I mean, nobody is, in other words, attachment, the key one of attachment is dissatisfaction. So it's the primordial energy within an ordinary person. I'm not enough, I don't have enough, dissatisfaction. So then we want more, and then all this business, you know. These are the ones these thoughts seem to be there kind of in the background. So then we have to one practice. These sort of like use the analogy of the weeds and flowers. These are the weeds, so we have to calm them down and try to pull them out and control them. But then we have to remember to grow the flowers as well. So we have to don't wait for thoughts to come. You see, we seem to have this mind that's uncontrolled. You don't invite the angry thoughts. You don't invite the jealous thoughts. They're just there, aren't they? They seem to be there out of nowhere. But we have to invite the positive ones. Consciously have positive thoughts. And then we sound like Pollyanna. Oh, positive thinking, how ridiculous. What good is that, you know? But we have to do it. And they will become habits eventually. You see? Makes sense, people? What time is it? 2:30. We have some more time. Okay, any other questions? Do you see my point? So it's practicing controlling the negative ones and practicing having the positive ones.
And just to follow up, that's all the techniques, like Tom Lan.
All of this essentially is
All of this
variations
is
of the
for-
same theme.
okay.
Yeah, they are. There are very specific approaches and techniques. Some are more focused on. So first of all, you control your body and speech. You control the servants of your crazy thoughts. Then you begin to control those crazy thoughts. That's all the first scope of the Lam Rim. Then you get to the level where you proactively develop the positive thoughts.
Yeah.
Until eventually the flowers start to grow and overcome the weeds.
Yeah.
It's a progress, it's a process, but it's very conscious and intentional. We tend to be victims of whatever's in the mind. We don't think we can change our mind. We think, oh, this is who I am, you know, I'm depressed, I can't help it, it just comes from nowhere. So we buy into those stories, and that's how tragedy we get stuck. The mind, as Lama Zopa says, we can mold our mind into any shape we like. That's the point. This is really the essence of it. Do you understand?
Yes.
Good. What else, people? Huh? Who?
So-
Yes, honey.
So we were talking, I don't know your name,
My name is
Karen and I were talking
Who?
about Karen
Karen.
and I were,
Good, darling.
we're talking about meditation.
Yeah,
And Karen, was talking about the meditation practice.
yeah.
So could you talk a little bit about how meditation fits into this?
This method, well, you see, there's a million kinds of meditation, but our trouble, I think, in the West, we have such a concrete, concrete view of meditation as okay, what do you think it is, Karen? Have you got a view of meditation, or have you done some, or you have an idea what you think it means?
The main way I've done it is guided meditation, because I find that the chatter of my mind.
There you go.
overpowers
Right.
What I'm
Okay.
trying to do.
What kind of guided meditation? A certain system, or?
What do you mean a system?
What I mean, were they Buddhist or Christian or Hindu, or somebody just some thought
Not
about
some
some
particular.
on an app or
stream
something.
anything like that.
I understand. Yeah, okay. So the Buddhist perspective on the word meditation, there's two modes of meditation, formal style, formal meditation techniques, millions of techniques, but two main methods. So the first one is what they call it concentration, samadhi in Sanskrit. It's a technique, and this is what's invented by these Indians well before the Buddha, 3,000 years ago. It's been around. This is surprising to us, It's a technique where it's like training yourself to focus on something. The concept is so simple, it's a joke. Training yourself to focus. And so why do you want to do that? Because your mind's all over the place. So we all know if you can't concentrate, you can't even make a cake. If you can't concentrate, you can't drive a car. If you can't concentrate, you can't achieve anything. So no way in the universe can you learn to unpack and unravel what the hell is going on in your mind if you can't first concentrate. So concentration is a practical skill where you're training yourself to focus. So the simple technique that Lord Buddha taught at the very beginning was to focus on something that's coming in anyway, is your breath. So you use that as the object of your focus. The object of your focus. One example. There's very many variations, but this is a simple example. So there's nothing special about the breath, but it happens naturally. So you do 5 minutes, you sit down and you decide, I'm going to watch my breath. That's it. Don't make it mystical. It is not to make the thoughts go away. It is not to feel good. It's not to have a nice feeling. It's not to have a vision. It's nothing. It's a practical technique. Learning to focus your mind. Of course, it's intensely difficult, because the thoughts completely take over, just like you said, Karen. So this is simple, but it really demands effort. And that's why I start with 5 minutes. So you say, I'm going to watch my breath. So naturally, you pay attention to the breath. Within 3 seconds, you're wandering off with the stories. So you bring your mind back to the breath. You train yourself, and then you do it again. And another 2 seconds again, you wander off again, and you catch yourself, and you bring it back. It's a very specific technique. So the benefit of that long term is to get this concentration. That'll take several years up in the mountains. Forget that. But the immediate benefit of that in your daily life, when after your 5 minutes of making effort to focus on your breath, you open your eyes, you go down to the kitchen. I always use the example, and there's your hubby, or what's her name? Where's she gone? She's disappeared. Joey's roommate, and he's slurping his coffee yet again. And as normally you want to kill him. I told you I can't stand slurping your coffee, blah, blah, blah. But now you go, watch your mind, because you're catching it. You're not watching your breath anymore, but you've trained yourself to pay attention. So now you switch the attention from the breath to your own bloody mind, and you hear the annoyance coming, and like powder, you shut the mouth. That's the first kind of meditation, which is enabling you to then do the second kind, which they call, it's don't worry what it is, but this is exactly what you're doing in the second mode. You learn, so then there's very sophisticated methods there of learning then to use that focus to start to unpack and unravel what's going on in your mind in meditation, but just doing it right there. When you hear your hubby slurp the coffee, you're doing the second mode, and your visualization techniques, that's the second mode. But the first one, the prerequisite, is to concentrate. Then you can do all kinds of visualizations, doing analysis, thinking through what's going on. That's the second way you use, and that's where the real work happens. This one is just the training. Benefits come from this. Incredible benefits, but you've got to focus first. And then you use that in the second mode, by positive thinking, controlling your thoughts, giving yourself a talk, analyzing something, blah, 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 like that. That makes sense? That makes sense?
Control your mind, it doesn't control you.
What's we done?
It's as if you control your mind, it doesn't control you.
Exactly. That's what we're trying to do. Right now, we feel like we're being pulled from pillar to post by our thoughts, but turn the other way around. Slowly, we learn to know we can control, we can be in charge. Not to control in a bad way, but to be in charge rather than being a victim. That's exactly right. Exactly the point, Karen. Exactly that. Yes. You just come away from a long retreat. Tell us about it. Don't tell us about it. But anyway, ask your question. It's private. I'm sorry. Go on, ask your question.
How do you distinguish between things you can change?
Can't hear you, darling.
How do you distinguish between the things that you can change and the things that you can't?
What do you mean by distinguish?
Like,
I mean, you either know you can open the prison door or you can't. Yeah. You either know, like with I mean, okay, good example with I keep forgetting, Joey. She's living in a house with 2 roommates she can't stand. So if she'd said to me, I can't move, I have no money, and I'm locked in this house, then the answer would not be do what I said. The answer would be, well, control your mind, because you've got no choice. But if you have the choice and you can change the situation first to protect yourself, but if you're brave enough or if you don't have a choice, sometimes my prison friends don't have the choice. It's very clear. Then they're forced to work on their mind, But Joey, it just makes sense if she has the power and the money and the means to get the hell out of the way, because you don't have to be guilty about it. You have to know what we're capable of,
For example, like if someone is annoying you, and
that's
then
right.
You try to change them.
Well, that's it. No, well, that's the thing. The very first practice is it is not our right. I mean, you know yourself how rude somebody is if they keep saying, don't do this and don't do that and do it this way and do it that way and don't slurp your coffee. It's infuriating. This is the very first level of practice. Okay, if it's a husband beating you up, then okay, if you can stop him, fine. But at least start with the small things. If someone's annoying us, this is the commonest thing on the planet. This is exactly the practice. This is why it's so hard, even the simplest solution. As I said, the hubby slurping his coffee. Is that somebody annoying me, isn't it? So Joey is allowed it to build up. She's got such aversion to these people. And now that's why people kill each other, because they don't pay attention. And then we always give a reason why we are allowed to tell the person to stop doing something. It's heavy duty and it's intensely difficult. That's the beginning of practice. That's the beginning of practice, isn't it? And that's the point. If we can't, if you really can't, like if the object is alcohol and the thought is attachment, then don't expect yourself to give it up when it's such an intense. For Joey, don't expect yourself to change if it's got to the point of such anger. Get yourself out of the situation. But before it gets to that, that's the point. Work on the mind. This is the point. This is the point. That's just when the practice starts. So we can be as nice as we like with our holy meditation every day and think we're lovely practitioners, but until we can control the thoughts when the bad thing happens, we're not practicing at all. And that's how we practice, to get ready to do that. That's the practice. That's the practice. Do you understand? It's outrageous. And as you just said, annoying, they're not trying to kill you, but it's annoying, you know. Annoyance is called anger. It's quiet anger. Do you understand? Too much. This is too much, you know. Who's that? Alona, talk to me, sweetheart. Alona's in Sweden. I'm coming to Sweden. You know that, don't you, Alona?
Yes, and I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.
I can't wait to hug you, if you allow me.
Go on. Talk to me.
Venerable, I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a new job, and I learning new things, and it's lots of new people, and my attachment to reputation, it's, you know, freaking out.
Tell me
And
why. What's happening? People, you not get along with the new people, or what? What's going on?
I get along with them, but I learn new things, and when I do something wrong, while I'm learning, they don't tell me directly. They
don't tell you, or they do tell you?
They don't.
So you're
They
worried
tell
that
somebody
what
else.
they're thinking about you. So you're worried about what they're thinking. Is that right?
Yes, and because it's new, it's so intense. You know, I don't want to lose that job. That's a
I
fear.
understand, but are they showing it? Are your superiors or your bosses or whatever you call them? Are they showing that they pleased with you, or they're showing nothing?
They don't show anything.
How long have you been at the new job?
I'm doing it for 5 months.
That's hardly a new job. That's a whole lifetime. 5 months. You mean? But I mean, are you doing a good job? Be realistic now. Don't just look at the things you do badly. Are you doing some things good?
Yes.
You're doing the job well. I mean, you're dealing with people and no one's complaining about you, and you're being kind to people, and you're getting your job done. So what you've got to do is look at your own dissatisfaction, Alona, your own always thinking, I'm not doing enough, always worried about you're not doing enough, which is a function of attachment. You've got to learn to be satisfied, but be realistic with yourself.
I want to ask, you know,
about think of you. What?
When that attachment to reputation comes, I can feel it, emotion, you know, I can feel when it comes in my body.
Yeah.
Can I nip it in the butt somehow? So to break that.
I can't hear you so well, darling. I'm sorry, it's partly because I'm deaf and I'm just so lazy I don't wear my ear business. So go on, talk again.
I would like to, when it arises, kind of nip it in the butt before it fully explodes inside.
I mean, okay.
Yeah.
Give an example of it arises that you're afraid of what people are thinking of you. Give a simple example. I mean, you do your job. You've been there for 5 damn months. They're not complaining. You must be doing something good. So when does it arise? Give an example of when your fear of what your bosses think of you or your colleagues, when does it arise? Give a simple example.
Well, when I work with a patient,
what, darling?
And my doctor, I work with a patient.
So what's your job?
I assist orthodontist doctor.
You're a doctor's assistant?
Yes.
So you work with patients?
Yes.
Okay, so give an example.
So when I do something that doctor tell me to do, and I feel I cannot do certain things and I ask for help, you know, they looking at me saying, you should do that.
Okay, so stop. The doctor gives you an instruction, but then you can't do it or you can do it. What happened? You said you asked for help. What do you mean you asked for help?
Because I'm not experienced yet in certain procedures.
Okay, so the doctor says do something, and then you realize you haven't got the experience, so you say, I can't do it and I need help. And then what does the doctor say?
You should be doing it by now, like you should be.
Oh, he says that too. You should be able to do it by now. So then he's obviously annoyed with you. So he is showing disapproval. So then what do you do after he says that?
I tell him that cannot do this. So because I don't want to hurt the patient. So
What?
he can't do.
What?
I tell him I cannot do it. I tell him to do it himself.
Oh, okay. And then what does he say?
He's very unhappy with that.
He's not happy. So then you're freaking out because you think he's going to disapprove of you and get you sacked.
Exactly. Yes.
How often does that happen? Once a month, once a day?
In a few weeks.
Every 2 weeks. Well, honey child, you're doing okay. Relax. Jesus God, Ilona, you're doing all right. Rejoice in your good qualities. Try and be a bit more confident and learn what your jobs are and don't be so afraid. If you're so afraid of what people think, you won't be able to do anything. So take some risks sometime, okay? Okay, if it means you're going to kill the patient, then don't take a risk. But take risks, all right? Come on, Ilona. You're such a good girl. You're ridiculous. Stop it. And rejoice in your good qualities. Rejoice in your good job. And seduce this doctor and make him think you're just gorgeous. Because men are hopeless when it comes to girls. So don't worry about it.
And we'll have some other problems.
That's just between girls, okay? Come on. This is a lady doctor. That's too bad.
Thank you.
Anyway, Ilona, come on, relax. Do some rejoicing. I think it's time to go home. It's not the end, but it's time to go home, I think. Any more questions? Nothing in there? Yes, good, Karen.
My daughter is 8, and
8.
she's been having some difficulty at school.
Oh, darling.
It's been constant bullying.
Oh,
since she's gotten
sweetheart,
to this new school.
This is awful.
And she at first was very timid and she wouldn't speak up, but eventually she did. And she can't prove the things that are happening, so there's inaction on the other side of it. And I can tell that's sort of happening, and I've advocated on her behalf as much as
Good,
possible.
yes.
But now she's at a point where she stopped telling me, and she's sort of starting to explode and fly off at the handle with the small.
She started to what?
She's getting very upset over the
So she-
smallest thing. So
Oh,
I know
darling,
something's
this is
happening,
awful.
and she's suppressing.
Oh, the poor
And she's
sweetheart.
holding it. So these are very great concepts and things that you told me.
Yes.
Great tools that you
Yes,
did. But
yes.
how can I sort of explain it to her or equip her so that she can use and understand?
I understand, darling, I understand. So you can't make it different at the school? You haven't talked to the school? You can't talk
Yes,
to
I
the
have. I've been up there.
But they accept it? Do they accept it's true? Are they supporting you, the teachers? That's really important. Are they not supporting you?
Without proof, they're just sort of, not dismissive, but it's just like, what can you do?
But I mean, that teachers must be in the room and they know these children that she's talking. Have you mentioned names to the teacher?
Yes.
But they must have know these kids, but they don't.
Yes.
But they don't support you. The teachers don't support.
They will investigate and look into it, but if they can't prove what she's saying,
No, I
then it's
know.
just sort of.
I know,
like,
but in
specific
some way-
incident, like about 4 inches of her hair was ripped off in the front.
Oh,
But
sweet.
because there was no witnesses or anything like that. they
And
just
what do you
looked
think?
at
So
her.
what do you think you can do? I mean, do you think she should leave the school? Is it that bad, the poor darling?
I would like her to leave the school because it's been a very tough year, to the point where she was bullied so bad in the first class, they moved into another one.
This is
And
awful.
this hair incident happened in the second class.
This is awful. Yeah. Is it possible to? This is the trouble. Like with Joey's example, is it possible to leave? If it is, then get the hell out.
She
Is it
doesn't
possible
want
to?
She's begged me not to change the school.
Oh,
but she
really?
loves the school.
Oh, she does love it.
Yeah, she
Well,
doesn't.
then, okay,
But if
that's-
I had my choice, I would leave.
Okay, then. So then, so maybe she's a bit. So she's courageous. Is she learning to deal with this or what?
I don't think so, and I think that's why she's having these
Oh,
sort of,
darling.
these outbursts.
Yeah.
Because that's just how the energy, the emotion comes out of her. She's
Absolutely.
not processing it properly.
Sweetheart.
She's a sweet girl.
So how do you deal with it? How do you, given that she doesn't want to go, which is interesting, what's your approach? How do you help her get stronger and clearer and wiser?
So, of course, advocating for herself, if she can sort of hit back when she can.
That's right. Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to remove yourself from the situation,
That's
get
right.
away from the catalyst of
That's
the
right.
trouble. But none of these things have worked because these things seem to follow.
They're right in her class, the same
Yeah.
kids.
At
Is
recess,
one, is
the
it
teachers
two, is
are
it
looking,
three?
Things like that.
And how many kids? One, just one?
That's bothering her?
Yeah.
Several. One karate kicked her on the stomach the other day. And this kid has a history of violence against women at that school. He actually choked another school.
This is
But
awful.
his parents will advocate on his behalf.
Of course they will, this is the
He's
trouble. It's so awful. I hear awful things about kids in schools. It's just so awful.
It's getting tougher.
It is so painful. I can't imagine.
Yeah.
So awful for poor little children, you know. Kids are so mean. So what do you think is the solution then? What do you really think yourself is a solution?
Well, the first thing I'm doing is signing her up for self-defense classes, because she.
I think, you see, okay,
she's
let me-
known punching.
Okay, so let me tell you this.
Yes.
I did martial arts for many years, you know, when I was a Buddhist as well. And this is when I was in my 40s, actually, I did it years ago. And I remember going to this particular teacher, and you should check the teachers very carefully. And it was Kung Fu. And Mr. Lee, this Chinese guy, and I watched one of his kids' classes, and I really saw, it was in London, all these working class kids, it was incredible for them. They were learning discipline, they were learning self-respect by doing, not just self-defense, but doing like a really good martial arts. But get a good teacher. It can be it can help a child completely change. It can give them it doesn't just give them methods to fight, it gives them self-confidence. And when they have self-confidence, the aura they give is completely different. I think martial arts would be incredible for her. So really research good teachers, go around, check them out, especially see kids classes, you know, because I really can see all these young kids, these young working class kids, you know, 60 of them. They were amazing. You really see it was so good for their mind. And it's the self-confidence that makes all the difference. Okay. I really recommend that, I tell you. But really check the teachers. Get really good teacher who genuinely cares and has got a good discipline. You understand? How do you decipher? How do you sort of vet? By using your common sense, darling. You use your common sense, you can tell. I swear to you, you can tell. Go to the different teachers and you can see the way they deal with the kids. You can see how they teach. You can tell immediately, I promise you, Karen. You trust your wisdom there. Do you understand? And you go by reputation as well, check on other people. But I think it's not just self-defense, but really good martial arts. It can be such a discipline. And then for the mind as well, that's the whole point, that's what I'm saying. You know, and the thing is, really good martial arts teachers don't teach you to punch and kick. They're using that tool, but it's in order to use it as defense, but in order to really is to become a better person inside. I tell you, I got so much from it. Get the good, you'll find one, I promise. That could really give her good tools, I promise you. Because she says very clearly she doesn't want to leave, but okay, that's important. I think if you really research that, they have to be everywhere these days, classes, martial arts and things.
Yes.
Check around. What?
They're everywhere here in Brooklyn.
Well, okay, so really check it out, Karen, I promise. I never forget that kids class. It was amazing to watch it. That was what gave me confidence in that teacher, the way he was with the kids and the way the kids developed respect, discipline with each other, and therefore had this energy about them. You know, so no one can touch them then, because self-confidence is, nobody can bully people who have got self-confidence, you know, and if they do, it doesn't touch. It's really excellent. It's a kind of a surprising, but a really good technique to help kids become strong. I promise you. That's my opinion. And then just talk these ways, but I mean, that just give it to her automatically. It'll make her feel strong. It'll help her feel her body. She'll feel more centered. It really is a good technique to help you really get into your body. But any sport, in a way, it does that. You've got a really good group. But martial arts is a good one because it doesn't always expensive. It's like tennis is sort of fancy and you need tools. And this, you just need your body, you know. And I was a fan of it, so you can tell. But I really can see the difference for kids. I promise you, Karen. Okay, people, time to go. Maybe Alona needs a bit of Kung Fu as well. Okay. Okay, people, we finish. We just think, here we are, hour and a half, got like a dream with all these thoughts we've had. If anything's useful, we use it to develop our potential to help others. Jangchub Semchog Rinpoche, Maki Panam Kegyuchig, Kepanyampa Mepayam, Gomne Gomdu Pavasho. All right, people. That's enough. Thank you, darlings. Goodbye, everybody. Happy to see you all. Thank you, sweethearts. Bye.